Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to learn about angle relations today. So you need this piece of paper and you're going to fill it out as I go. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is vertical angles. These are angles that are across from each other. So for example, angles 4 and 3 are vertical angles because they are across from each other. So when you have two lines that intersect, the angles that are across, so in this instance 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 are vertical angles. So they're the same measurement. So remember, you can pause the video to copy down the notes if I'm going too fast. Adjacent angles, they're two angles that are next to each other and they share a common side. So it's kind of like the angle addition postulate. We said there's this ray that cuts an angle in half. Those angles that were created are adjacent angles. They have no relationship to each other. They can be different measurements. So if you see here, the measure of angle 1 is smaller than the measure of angle 2. Adjacent means just right next to each other. So they're kind of attached by that side BD. Complementary means 90. So this is two angles that add up to 90 degrees. It's not necessarily that they're adjacent angles. So you could have had like angle 1 here and angle 2, and say that angle 1 and angle 2 added to 90. So complementary means two angles that add a 90, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be next to each other. Supplementary angles, these are two angles whose sum is 180 degrees. And again, these angles don't need to be next to each other. So in this picture, we have angle 1 and angle 2. Together they make a straight line. It's just easier to visualize that rather than draw a picture and show that it's 90 degrees. An example though is, say if you have perpendicular lines, which means they make a 90-degree angle, and we label those angles. Angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary angles because this is 90 and this is 90, and 90 degrees plus 90 degrees is 180 degrees. So 2 and 3 here are supplementary angles. They are also vertical angles because they're across from each other. And the last thing that we're going to talk about is a linear pair. So I actually have more notes for this one. Oops, sorry. So a linear pair are two angles that are adjacent and supplementary. So this is like a special case. It has to be both. They have to be next to each other, they have to be adjacent, and they have to equal 180. So this example here is a great example, and it's the only example that will suffice for a linear pair. So these two angles equal a straight line, but they're right next to each other. So that's why I wrote the notes here. Linear pairs are a special case. Not all adjacent angles are linear pairs, only when they make a straight line. So I'm going to move my paper. So like this is not a linear pair because it doesn't make a line, but these are adjacent angles. This is a linear pair and it is adjacent, so it's both. So it is a linear pair. It works. Okay. We're going to switch on to the back. Okay. So we need to fill in angle 2 here. My apologies. Okay, so what are these angles? You're going to click all that applies. There may be more than one thing. So are these adjacent? No. These are vertical. You don't know if they're complementary, and you don't know if they're supplementary because you don't have any identification if this is a right angle. It's not a linear pair, so it's only vertical. Number 2, are these adjacent angles? Yes, they are adjacent angles. They are complementary because this is 90, so that means these two over here would equal 90, so 1 plus 2 should equal 90. They don't equal 180, and they're not a straight line. Okay, these are adjacent. These are not vertical angles. They don't equal 90. It is a straight line, so therefore if it's adjacent and supplementary, then it is a linear pair. These are adjacent angles. they're not vertical, they're not 90, they're not 180, and they're not a linear pair. So it's just adjacent. Okay, over here, these are not adjacent angles. These are vertical angles. So complementary, it's kind of hard to picture it. So if we're saying that this is 1 and 1 and 2 are the same measurement, that pretty much means that this is 2 over here, and these would make a straight, a right angle, so that is complementary. Not 180, not a straight line. And the last one over here, these are not next to each other, so they're not adjacent. These are vertical angles. These would also equal 90 degrees because, no, I'm sorry, wrong one. Both of these angles are equal to 90 degrees, and 90 plus 90 is supplementary. They are not a linear pair because they're not adjacent. All right, hope this video worked.